Hey everyone, it's Jonathan from Awareness Ascending. Just wanted to let you know we have a private members network at awarenessascending.com. If you sign up and become a member with us, you get live stream access. So what that allows you to do is to ask questions directly to the hosts, get readings, get healings, get live channel direct messages for your questions, information that you want, and just be part of our conversation as it develops. So head on over. We have a 7-day free trial at awarenessascending.com and enjoy the show. Well, we're going to get started tonight with our next episode of Valence. We're here tonight with Olivia Parr-Rud, who's, my gosh, pretty dynamic person. So I'm excited to talk with her tonight. Author of multiple books, creator of Wisdomology, host of our new upcoming show, Medical Aging. Yeah.
Magical.
Magical Aging. And a list of other things, former data scientist. Thanks, Olivia, for coming on the show tonight.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, your past is so rich and so formative for what you're doing now. Maybe a good place to start is to just go back in time a little bit and talk about this data scientist life that you lived, and the two lives. It sounded like you were, when you were giving me the short version, two lives that were kind of coexisting, one being data scientist.
Yeah, so I'm going to start really young just because it kind of explains a lot, but I won't take long. So as a kid, I was pretty creative and into kind of a lot of mystical ideas, supernatural stuff, just in my imagination. And I was had a hard time focusing, and because of this creative nature of mine. And so I couldn't read very well. And there was a lot of pressure in my family to read. All my older sisters and my mother were big readers. So I think there was a little bit of a rebellion there, right? And so I just wasn't a great reader, and math came easily. So I ended up just studying math. I never really liked school because it was too structured. And when I was 5, my dad died in a plane crash, and my mother went into a grief and started to work all the time. So I was really on my own. There was just this pretty deep trauma to our family. So surviving through all that, all the abandonment issues, never feeling like I liked school very much, I kind of struggled through. And then when I was just starting to kind of find myself around age 19, I was in a car accident and spent almost a year in the hospital, just really from a broken leg. Back then, they didn't want to do surgery. So I was in traction and then a body cast, and just the assault on my body, which we'll get back to later, why I share that. So I got out. And I really liked working. Like, I liked the creativity and the industriousness of the corporate world. But I was also had a lot of emotional problems and ended up getting married to another wounded soul. Went to college for math. That's where I met him. And we ended up moving out west, and I became kind of this earth mom. And I was really happy for the first time. But I spent about 10 years just being a stay-at-home kind of busy mom, and then decided I liked business and wanted to go back to work. And by this time, I'd done a lot of healing work, spiritual growth work, and I wanted to study psychology. But a friend of mine said, you should use your math skills because you'll have a much better opportunity to have a decent career and make money. And at that time, my husband's health was starting to go downhill. He passed away like 20 years ago. But when that time came, I thought, okay, that's the practical route. So I ended up going to graduate school and got a master's degree in statistics. So I landed in this corporate job that was so fear-based. It was a small credit card company in San Francisco. And I really thought I was on another planet. Like, I was, this really open-hearted earth mom. And now I was in this cutthroat corporate environment. But I had a set of skills that they needed. And I did well as far as my technical work. And I got promoted. And then I ended up moving to a different company just because it was a little bit better culture, and started getting some attention because of the work I was doing, and decided to write a book. And the next thing I knew, I was on a global stage speaking about, back then they called it data mining. Now it's kind of data science. And I was being asked to speak all over the world. And I was terrified, but I did it because I kind of got in a meditation that these were the skills I needed to do my real work. And so I just kept pushing through. And as I started also really studying the different corporate cultures and how the ones that treated people well were really, they did better. And I didn't understand why until I started realizing that just the pace of change made people more important than, say, systems and processes. That because of the speed of change, because of technology and data and all that, the companies that could change the fastest and be more agile were the ones that succeeded. And this really required the human element. So I wrote a book on that, which didn't do great. It was an academic look at the importance of people skills, but it really set me on a path of thinking, like, why am I here and what is my purpose? Because I knew it wasn't to be a data scientist. So I wrote a few other books. I wrote one called Love at Work, where I actually did research on companies and how they treated their people and whether they did better financially. And the data just proves it. And then I did a radio show interviewing people, like, why wouldn't companies adapt to these more loving ways of treating their employees? And, a lot of it's power struggles and wounded leaders and all of that. And eventually the technology was changing in the data science field so fast. And I was at the point where I would have had to go and learn Python and R and all these other languages. And I just had no appetite for it. So this was maybe 5 years ago. I said, well, what am I here to do? Now, I turned 71 in January, and I feel like I finally know what I'm supposed to do when I grow up. And I have a lot of energy. So I started looking at, okay, what do I know that not only helps me, but might help other people who are older? And I think with the situation in the world, we all know we're going through huge changes. I really feel like we all need to share our wisdom. And so I came up with this idea of Wisdomology, which we can talk about a little bit later, which is this transformational 3-step process to get your wisdom out to the world. And I thought, well, maybe I could help others with this. And then including all the things I learned to slow the aging process, because after I got out of the hospital when I was 20, the next year my mother died. So I was on my own, and I was really sick. And so in my early 20s, I learned about alternative medicine. So early on, I was eating organic foods, doing supplements, body cleansing, started intermittent fasting in 1985, and I've been doing it ever since. And I really think it has slowed my aging. In the accident, I also lost my spleen. And so I remember reading, okay, if you don't have a spleen, your liver has to work harder. And in the intermittent fasting, it rests your digestion. So that's like one of my things I write about. I have an ebook on my website. We can talk about that later, but where I share all these little things that I figured out, these techniques and practices to slow the aging process. So the idea of magical aging, and what I want to share, is what do other people know? And what are all the gifts and talents of people in their 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and beyond that aren't getting out to the world, because I just feel like they're so important. So that's kind of where it all came from.
Amazing. So Wisdomology, magical aging is an extension of Wisdomology. This is the next natural step.
It's like an umbrella that includes Wisdomology, which is the spiritual part. But then I have, in magical aging, I have other information or things that I've learned around how to be physically healthy, mentally healthy, emotionally healthy. I've done a lot of training around releasing trauma and really creating our life with our thoughts, all the great, like Joe Dispenza work and Brian Greene and all the people that where we understand how to keep ourselves mentally young as well. So, yeah. And then the physical stuff many of us know about exercise and eating well. And then the mental part, just, keeping our brain sharp. So that's kind of the umbrella for it all. And then the wisdomology is what I think of as the spiritual piece, where we step into who we came here to be. Because I feel like we're all born with a purpose. And then discovering that can be a really great experience and also a gift to the world.
Well, let's go down that path a little bit further. Talk about the process, if you will, of actually identifying what that soul purpose is.
Great question. So it's a 3-step process. First, it's the what, which is, what is it we're here to share? What is our unique wisdom? And I define wisdom as kind of if you think about the old Venn diagram in math, or an overlap of, say, our knowledge and experience and our gifts and talents that we're born with, and then our intuition and our passion. What is it perhaps that we're bringing in from our higher source, or what gets us excited? And I have a training around this, and I'm doing a mastermind starting at the end of the year, where we'll go through lots of these processes, like, what did you love doing when you were a child, and where do you lose track of time? What are you doing when you feel like you're in flow and time just seems to either go by or stand still, or just you don't pay attention to it? These are clues to perhaps what your deep wisdom is. And then there's the why, which is, what is it that motivates you? What is it that gets you up and has you take action towards sharing your wisdom? And I often invite people to think about things like, you're being honored at a retirement dinner. What would you like people to say about you? What would you like to be known for? Or even it kind of sounds morbid, but your obituary, right? Where you're gone, you have no physical possessions at all. How do you want to be remembered? What impact do you want to have? And you can look around the world, like, what breaks your heart, or where do you get inspired? Who is it you feel like you're here to serve? Is it children? Is it entrepreneurs, or the elderly? Or, there's just so many populations that could benefit from our wisdom. So these are the things that really inspire us. And then there's the how. That's the 3rd step, which is, do you want to write or speak or teach or coach or mentor people? There's just all kinds of easy ways, especially with technology today, that we can get our wisdom out and, really make a difference and find a community of people that want to learn from us.
Amazing. Yeah, I could see that. Some of these steps would probably be easy to identify, and some of them would be like, that's a big nut to crack, getting to the underneath there. Because if you've been mulling on this topic for a while, dwelling on this topic for a while, you're building up a lot of resistance, perhaps, in one of those areas that you need to, that's where your Kung Fu is going to have to come in and get behind it all.
Yeah. And that's why it's good to have someone guiding you, because a lot of times we'll get stuck. I mean, I had imposter syndrome for the longest time, especially when I was invited to start speaking on stages. I was so terrified, and I just never saw myself as an expert, or it just took me so much, I guess, perseverance and courage to push through my fears. And a lot of that now, there's a lot of techniques. There's energy clearing work. There's all kinds of techniques for getting to the root of our trauma or our lack of confidence. And we understand how so many of us are wounded. And I think it does keep us from sharing our gifts. And a great trick. So if you've ever heard of the Johari window, where there's stuff we know, and then there's stuff we know we don't know. Right? And there's stuff we don't know that we know, and there's stuff we don't know that we don't know. So people can go look that up if you want more. But what's interesting is that there's things we know, but we don't realize it. And a great way to find out is to email 4 or 5 people that you trust and just ask them, what do they see as your strengths? And how do they see your impact in the world? You'd be amazed at what other people see about us that we don't see in ourselves. Because I think many of us, when we get into a relationship or a conversation where we feel trusted and safe, we can really open up and inspire other people. But we don't even see that about ourselves as a gift to that other person. And so that's a great way to see what is your effect on others. And that's a clue perhaps to what is your wisdom.
That's a great tip. Regarding trauma, do you find that trauma is pretty much the sole, maybe core issue that is blocking people from stepping into their soul purpose?
I do. So I think it's a combination of trauma and blocking beliefs. So we all have blocking beliefs, right? That especially if we grew up where there was money struggles, and I still struggle with this, right? To just feel abundance. And it's not like I want to spend money, like there's no end to it, but knowing that I will be taken care of. And I really feel like that's true if I'm in my purpose, that I will be fine. And I'd say I 99% trust that. There's times when I may hesitate. So we're all kind of works in process. So there's probably a lot of blocking beliefs that are really easy to find and get rid of. Those are just superficial. The deeper trauma work often comes from different processes where we can be guided perhaps to earlier times in our lives, or even if you believe in past lives or generational trauma. There's so much research now that shows that something that perhaps was even in our lineage could be affecting us. So it might not even have happened in our lifetime, but it's in there as a core energy. It's really all energy. So I've studied a lot of those techniques. I don't do a lot of one-on-one trauma release work. I do it on myself and my family, my kids. But my daughter has studied it. She's much better than I am. She's like super intuitive and spends a lot more time studying this stuff. So I go to her now if I'm blocked. But there's things we don't even know. It could even be what we eat or how we just take care of ourselves. And maybe we're not doing the best for ourselves, and we don't know that we have an underlying lack of self-love or a part of us that doesn't feel worthy. I love Brene Brown's work around just feeling worthy of love and belonging. A lot of people have a hard time even saying that they love themselves. A great test of this is to look at yourself in the mirror and say, I love you, and see how hard that is. I could not do it for years. It's really intimidating for some people. And that's a great sign that there may be work to do around your own self-love. And you could probably think of a lot of reasons for it. It almost doesn't matter the why. Once you identify the what, the trauma, then there's great ways, techniques for releasing and learning to love ourselves. And now you can do it quickly. When I first discovered that piece about my low self-confidence, it was right kind of when I got into the corporate world under all that pressure, and I was stressed and had nightmares and all these things. And I learned about Louise Hay's work and got a tape called Feeling Fine Affirmations. And it was just these silly, sing-songy, I love myself, you love yourself, my friends love me, your friends love you. It was kind of ridiculous, but I would put it on at night and fall asleep. So for like an hour or two a night, I would be listening to that. And then at some point I would have headphones on, I would just take them off. But I noticed after a few weeks that I was reacting differently, that I wasn't as easily triggered. And I thought, wow, this is actually making a difference. And what it does is it rewrites the old neural pathways in your brain. And so I did it for about 6 years straight. I just kept looking for different recordings that I would do. And now they're on YouTube. You can go find them. So every once in a while, if I'm really stressed, I'll go to sleep listening to something like that. So it's a little slower than some of the deep trauma work, but it certainly works and it's free. And I recommend it to everyone.
I've heard, I've had maybe 3 or 4 people tell me over the last 10 years that they've done a similar thing and have had exponential results from doing it. It's just something so simple. I interviewed Bruce Lipton, I don't know, a couple of years ago on the podcast that kind of preceded this one. And he was saying the same thing, that he used to do that. That was his big transformation, doing that. And then he got into Psych K, which was sort of energy psychology technique that he ended up going on the road with. God, I can't remember the creator's name, but the two of them were doing that a lot in the early 2000s. But that's fascinating. Are you familiar with Patrick Flanagan? And so he passed years ago, but was a Sedona icon, inventor, really, really kind of savant genius. But he has a device called the neurophone, and basically you wear these 2 transducers on your temples. You can also wear it here on the forehead, and it bypasses. So you play some audio signal through it, like affirmations, for example, and you don't hear it. It gets transmitted into your bones and bypasses your typical auditory cortex and goes like basically straight into your subconscious. So it's like a super learning tool that he got a couple patents on a while back. And so I think I'm gonna take your technique and stack it with the neurophone and see what kind of results I can get.
That's a great idea. And actually, I learned about this technique that I shared from this guy, Brian Tracy. Do you remember him?
Yeah.
And it was back in the 80s. And he spoke at we were going to a Unity church, and he just said something like, if you listen to affirmations or read them for 30 days, it'll overwrite all the negative messages you had as a child. And it kind of made sense to me logically, but I didn't have time to do it during the day. And so that's why I would go to sleep at night and thinking, okay, I'm not even really awake, but it's going into my subconscious. So that makes total sense that tool would work really well, because that's really, what is it? 95% of our reactions and our behaviors are based on our unconscious or subconscious mind. So when people get triggered and they're surprised, it's all under there, but most of us have no clue for most of our lives.
I'd like to circle back to your comment about trusting abundance flowing in that process. If you could detail it out a little bit more, because conceptually, I think people get that, but as an experience, it's a bit more elusive, and to feel a sense of trust versus to kind of repeat it mentally as an exercise. If you could talk a bit more about this.
So do you mean trusting in abundance or just trusting in things in general?
Well, sort of in general, but in specifically to abundance, because you made that reference before.
So I think some of it comes from trial and error, right? Is that if you've made it through many years of a lifetime, you can kind of look back and perhaps see all the times where you almost didn't make it, but then something came in and it all worked out. So I try to use those as confidence. And I now am very connected to spirit. So I just pray. And I also got this, one of the things that motivates me to do this kind of work, or what I think of as play, is that I've had a lot of trauma in my life. And I'm aware of what I'm here to do. And if I don't do it, when I go to my life review, I might get, they might say, okay, you got, we allowed you to have education and health and all these things. And then you didn't do your purpose. So now you have to go back through and have a traumatic life, so that's something that keeps me going. And so I really have this sense that if I'm on my path, that God or spirit is going to take care of me. So that's kind of the logical, perhaps, way that I deal with it. And then I try to do, especially around abundance, there's some great tricks. Like I go on, I could probably find one here on Amazon or somewhere. You can buy these. Here's one. They're like $1 million bills. Have you heard of these? And I pass them out sometimes to people. So if you just stick them in drawers and things, your unconscious mind will just start to know that you have abundance. It's like a trick to program that everywhere you look, there's money. So money is just coming to you, right? There's also you can be muscle tested to know if you have an unconscious limit to what's available to you particularly. So I saw a guy do this with a woman one time in a little workshop where he muscle tested her and she had a limit of what she thought she could earn a year. And then he did some clearing work and then it went way up. So there may just be some unconscious limit from our programming, our childhood. I found a tape as well on abundance that I listened to for months that just said things like, while I was asleep, I deserve abundance and I'm worthy of feeling comfortable and having beautiful things. And for me now, it's about abundance is about allowing me to have a greater impact. So sure, I'd like nice things, but I have plenty to keep me comfortable. And really how I see my abundance serving is that I'm able to then share more and perhaps be of service to others. So I think this is maybe a judgment, so I'm not sure if it's true, but if we feel like attracting it is going to make it better for everyone, maybe it makes it easier. I'm not sure if that's true or just a mindset, but I like to think that it helps. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And it reminds me of some of Lynn McTaggart's work in her, I don't know if it's her latest release, but the Power of Eight book that she published a couple of years back. She talks about creating these healing circles of 8 people. And when someone has sort of a block to healing, because it was focused more on healing, physical healing, it's usually because they're kind of on themselves, too much. They're kind of self-centered is not exactly the right word, but they're like looping on their problems and looping on how to fix it. And it's all really revolving around them. And what she'll have them do is focus outward on someone else, healing someone else. And that creates an even greater impact on their own personal healing. And so it's akin to what you were just talking about.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And I love her work. I've read that book a couple of years ago. Yeah. And it's amazing how that research emerged. Like, I think she was even surprised by the number, right?
Yeah.
It was pretty cool.
Intermittent fasting.
Yeah.
There might be some people that don't know what this is.
All right.
Give us a lowdown.
Yeah. So I was having severe digestive issues after being in the hospital because for almost a year I was on laxatives, antibiotics, and painkillers. And all of those things destroy your digestion or, like gut flora, and then not moving. I was in traction and a body cast for months. So I had serious digestive issues, and I was just searching, found things to help me after a few years. And when I came up, I read this book called The Fit for Life Diet, which I think you can still get. And it explained, and I've seen this now, I think it's part of Ayurveda, where our body has sort of 3 different cycles during the day. So from 4 a.m. until noon, we're in a cleansing cycle. And if we don't put food in our body, it continues. But if we eat something like a big breakfast with eggs and bacon, it stops that cleansing. But what the Fit for Life diet says, you can have all the fruit you want, because fruit does not require our digestion. It doesn't digest, I guess, until it gets into the intestines. So you can have fruit. And then So, and then it ends at noon. So noon to 8 at night is the burn time. And then 8 to 4 in the morning is build. That's when you're sleeping and your body rebuilds. And so I started doing this, and at first it was hard. I had to eat a lot of fruit, but finally I've gotten to the point now where I don't even get hungry. But I do drink celery juice around 9. So I get up. I actually started on this product recently called ASEA, which I love. If anybody's interested, connect with me. That kind of helps the cells work better. And then I do a little bit of green tea, but it's very mild, still kind of in that non-intrusive range. And then celery juice at 9, which is very alkalizing. I did get breast cancer in 99, which was from drinking soy milk, processed soy. And so,
is that because of the estrogen?
Yeah. So what I learned is processed estrogen is really bad. So tofu and tempeh, I think, are fine, organic, but anything processed, it flips from good estrogen to bad estrogen. And the original car accident, I had a trauma to my breast. I had like a little injury, like a scar tissue and that's where the tumor grew. So I had nothing in the other breast. So I know the scar tissue added to the weakness. But it, it got me really looking into what makes the body prone to cancer. And so that's why I think one of the things about intermittent fasting is that I know my body's in a very alkaline state for many, many hours. And so celery juice is very alkalizing. It's very antibacterial, antiviral. It's just one of these magic things. If anybody wants more, look up the medical medium. A lot of people are doing celery juice. So I do like 16 ounces every morning. And then around 11, I have a fruit smoothie, and I throw vitamins in, but it's all fruit. And then at noon, I have a lunch, and I try to finish. I try to do a lot of fluids in the afternoon, not right after I eat, but, starting around 3:00. And then I try to eat dinner between 5 and 6. So after 6, then I don't have anything else that requires digestion until, say, noon the next day. And if we think about all the issues people have, I think antacids are the number one over-the-counter drug people buy because they're just, eating a lot of bad stuff. I am not vegan. I'm trying to kind of be vegan, but I can't eat wheat. I get really itchy, and then dairy, it doesn't like me. So I haven't totally cut out meat, but I try to eat really clean, and I don't eat very often. And I eventually would like to get to where I'm vegan. And so, so the fasting is really just resting our digestion, which I feel that for me really slowed the aging process. Yeah.
So in your process of intermittent fasting, the window from basically waking to noon, fruit is okay.
Yeah. And I think of celery juice in that category. Yeah.
Okay. Great. Well, can you give us another aging tip that maybe we haven't covered?
Sure. So I think my skin looks young for 71. And my sister doesn't remember this, but I swear when I was in high school, I asked her, how do you keep your skin healthy? And she said, moisturize twice a day. So I do that. I moisturize my skin twice a day. I typically would put some toner on because I know the moisture is actually water. And then if we put a moisturizer, it just holds in the water. Now I'm using ASEA creams or lotion. So it's kind of like saline, but that's one of the secrets I feel to keeping my skin looking young. But I think a bigger one is actually avoiding a lot of sun when it's direct. So here's my secret. It used to be that I would follow times of the day, but that was challenging, different times of the year, different parts of the country. So my rule of thumb is that if my shadow is longer than my body, then it's safe to have my face in the sun. And I've sunbathed, every day for a whole summer, but I either do it really early in the morning or late at night because we do need that sun. And I don't like to wear sunscreen. I think vitamin D is really important. And that's the other thing is supplements. So vitamin D is a crucial one for everything. But I wear visors, and if I'm out, let's on a boat, and I can't have a hat or anything, I might wear sunscreen, but most of the time I just protect my face from the sun when it's directly overhead, because I understand that's when the ultraviolet rays get through the atmosphere more directly, so they can create more damage. But I have had sunburns, I think it's just maybe the quantity of them. Yeah.
You've mentioned ASEA a couple times. Tell us about this product a little bit more.
Well, it's brand new, it's been around for years, but I've just learned about it. So I've been on it for a couple of months, and it's called a redox product, where it goes in and helps your cells to just really do what they're supposed to do. So apparently our body creates it naturally when we're younger, and then as we age, we have less and less of this process. So I don't know. There's people that know a lot more. If anybody's interested, we could, expand on it with another guest or something. But I have had so much more energy. It's like I drink 4 ounces in the morning and 4 ounces at night. And then that's the drink. And then there's a lotion that I have here that it's like a cream, and it gets rid of pain, migraine pain, injury pain, and also heals scars. And I've had this thing on my arm that wasn't healing very well, and I started using that, and it's healing really quickly. I've heard of people getting rid of psoriasis. The woman I learned about it from had a head injury from a drunk driver hit her, and she spent years trying to get her brain to work, and the doctors just told her that was her new normal. And then her mother got her on this stuff, and now she's fine. So, it's ASEA. If anybody's interested, I can share more or talk to you privately.
Wonderful. Well, at this point, if anyone listening in has questions right now, you can chat them in or open up your mic if you want and ask Olivia. And I wanted to kind of go back to the psychological components and the work that you do in that realm. You mentioned affirmations. You mentioned sort of the blocking beliefs area and the trauma area. Do you have techniques, or are using like energy psychology techniques or anything in that domain to additionally assist with this?
Yeah, I use a couple techniques. One of them is called Clear, and it's kind of like EFT, but it's a little bit more simplified to just use different energy points in the body that can release the trauma. So if you think about it, when a deer gets hit by a car and it's just shaken up, it'll sit there and shake, right? And then it releases the energy. But we as humans often, if we're traumatized, it just gets locked in our energy body. We don't even know it's there. And so what the Clear process, or EFT, or some people call it tapping, that can just release that charge in our energy body. And then there's a lot of trauma release techniques that I've studied, quantum time technique, where you can go back in the timeline and reprocess things, see them differently, and release the trauma that way, or reframe things. There's just a lot of little, just a myriad of techniques for reorganizing and releasing trauma. That's kind of the best way I could put it.
Yeah. Well, good. So in regard to your new show that's going to come on the network here, Magical Aging, give us some idea of how that's going to flow, what the format's going to be like, what people can expect.
I want to talk to others who are also, say, magically aging or interested in, say, serving the population of people who are maybe older or want even younger people, but that want to step into their purpose. So I'll be bringing on guests. I probably won't do much alone. I just love learning as well as highlighting other people's gifts. So I'm planning, my first guest is going to be Katherine Hollis-Peters, and she works a lot with the physical and emotional side of magically aging with sound healing and Pilates, and she does retreats for people. So I talked to her this morning. I feel like she's going to be my first guest. Yeah.
Wonderful. So your show, just so we're the third Wednesday.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Because I think it's the 18th for this month. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the 18th. So that's fantastic. And do you intend to have a different guest each time?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, wonderful. And tell us your website and how people can get more info about you.
So my website is just oliviapr.com. So OLIVIAPR.com. And since the show is new, there'll be some things on there. Some stuff is still needing to be aligned, but there's a lot of free ebooks. So you can go and grab any of those. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about your ebooks that you mentioned a couple before, but what else is in there?
I have one that I get these downloads. I feel like they're just downloads. And I noticed there's a lot of tension politically between people, even within families. And I got this idea for dialogue, which I call high frequency dialogue, where people can talk about things that might be difficult, but from a space of love and respect. So I have these rules that you follow to have perhaps difficult conversations, but really any conversation. And you can connect at the heart level and really hear the other person and know that whatever upsets us is really all that trauma and all those beliefs about ourselves that really get us hostile towards the other person is really not related to them. So it kind of fits with that. I also wrote a book called The 5 Levels of Self-Awareness, which is kind of a clue to know what's running your life and maybe where there are things that are getting in the way. So like level 1 is, and I don't think any of your listeners or we fit this, but probably we can be in different levels in different parts of our lives. So level 1 is that everything's a mess and you don't have any idea why. You don't have any clue as to what you're doing that's creating these problems in your life, right? Level 2 is that you do or say things, and then after the fact, you think back and you go, oh, I shouldn't have done that, or I shouldn't have said that, right? Level 3 is like we're doing it in the moment and we're realizing it's the wrong thing. So you could think about, oh, I'm eating this right now and I really shouldn't be, or I'll be saying something and I'll think, oh my God, I can't believe that's actually coming out of my mouth, right? So that's level 3. Level 4 is that we have this temptation to say or do things, but we catch ourselves before and we can stop it. And then level 5 is that we're not even tempted to do those things anymore. So things get easier. So there's a lot of questions in there you can use to figure out where you are in that level and things you can do to help you get to the next level, which is a lot of just trauma work and positive affirmations and really stepping into what lights your fire and what really inspires you. And then I have one on wisdomology and one on 10 secrets to magical aging, which is a lot of what we talked about today. And there's one called the Dove Method, which I'll let you go read it. It's more just about how to connect at the heart level. Yeah.
Wow. There's a lot. So you're very prolific as a writer.
Thanks. It's funny how I told you that I couldn't read, right? As a child, I was a terrible reader. And I did a past life regression one time. I don't know, it was like in my 40s. Oh, well, I went to this workshop. Usually they do past life regressions, but this time he said he was going to take us on a journey in our, in our imagination, and we could ask a question. And at this point, I still had no idea what I was supposed to do, and I wasn't a good reader. And I did this whole journey where he guided us through the woods, and we met a wizard, and I asked the wizard, what am I supposed to do with my life? And the wizard said one word, write. And I just thought, well, hell, this didn't work, because there's no way I could ever write. And now it's really a gift that I didn't even realize I had until I was in my 50s. So you're never too late to discover your gifts, I think.
What does your writing process look like? Is it something that you sit down and do every day, like a discipline, or is it you get the download and it's like you're full on for a weekend or for a few weeks? What does it look like?
It's more the latter. I don't write every day. I have had book deals where I did have to write. The first 3 books I wrote were technical. So it was more just either writing out processes, which didn't take a whole lot of energy. It was just more like, felt like a business report. But when I wrote Love at Work, that was really different. Well, okay, let me back up to say, I was terrified when I got my first contract and I just started to write. Okay, so let me back up. Yeah. The very first contract I got to write a technical book for Wiley called Data Mining Cookbook. And I had a deadline and I was so scared to write that I just said, all right, I'm just going to type whatever comes and then that'll free up whatever's the good stuff. And I just started typing as though I was answering a question of someone's. And then after I read it, I went, oh, that's not too bad. And then I just kept going. And then when I sent it in to them, they said, this is great, keep going. And so that built my confidence, right? But it was still technical. So it wasn't that, it didn't have that creative thread or that vulnerability. I guess that's the best way to put it. So then when I got to my book, Love at Work, the first 2 chapters are more research-based, but then I got into my own story and that was scary. And I was writing and I didn't know what I was writing until after I read it. After I wrote it, I went back, I had no idea. So I think some people call that channeling or maybe writing from my higher self. And that can be blissful, but it can be scary. So what I would tell people is just try not to think. And sometimes they say doing it early in the morning is the best time to do this when your left brain isn't as engaged. So that's what I would do when I was working on a book, especially the kind where I was trying to come from my own higher self. Then I would write early in the morning and not judge it or think, just write. And a lot of it, like that 5 levels of self-awareness, that came out of just doing morning pages. And I don't do those all the time, but I did a 30-day discipline and that came through there. But a really great trick, if you like to write, if you think you want to write a book, but you don't like to write, just come up with an outline and some questions and have somebody interview you. Because if you like to talk, they can just record it and then you edit it and you've got a book. So that's a really great trick for getting your first book done.
Wow. It actually sounds like fun.
Good.
Do you have courses? Do you see clients one-on-one?
I don't have any one-on-one clients. I would consider it. It's not something I was seeking out, but if people are interested, I'd be open to that. My plan right now is to get the show launched. And then in the fall, I'm going to do an event and I'm going to start a mastermind in November. It'll be a 6-month mastermind called Rock Your Wisdom, where we'll go through and just end up with a book and a talk and, have people really get immersed in expressing and getting out there with their wisdom. But now I'm mostly focused on launching the show and then, and then doing that later in the year. But if people are interested in one-on-one, please reach, you can book a time with me at chatwitholivia.com and we can explore that. Or if you're interested in talking about a CEO or really anything, just let me know.
Wonderful. Chatwitholivia.com, oliviapr.com. Social media handles?
So I have Magical Aging Facebook page and Instagram. On LinkedIn, it's just Olivia Parr-Rud, all one word, on LinkedIn. And that's kind of the places where I play right now. It may expand, but I'm mostly just doing that.
Okay. Well, any last thoughts here, Olivia, before we sign off?
Well, one other thing I think that's a great tip for anyone who wants to just be who they came, stretch yourself and be a little bit more of maybe who you think you can be. And that is, see who you surround yourself with, and surround yourself with people who really see you for your greatness. And if anybody in your circle doesn't see you for who you are and who you want to be, but if they make you feel less than, find ways to perhaps spend less time with those people and surround yourself with people who get you and champion you and love you. And that's a great way to fill your cup when you're stepping out and perhaps, taking risks that feel a little scary, because it's great to have people who champion you and, want you to succeed.
Wonderful. That's another great tip. Well, thank you, gosh, so much for coming on to talk with us tonight. And we're looking forward to your new show this month.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
All right, everyone. So we're just a couple of logistical things here. So instead of having a second Valence show, which would be the third Thursday, is now been converted into the Spiritual Science Roundtable with Glenn Ryan, myself, and then we have a different special guest. This coming third Thursday will be with Sanjay Manchanda. And so both Sanjay and Glenn have their own shows on Awareness Ascending, but they haven't actually met before. And so I get to link these two great minds together. And Sanjay is a long-term meditator, works in one of the biggest awakening projects on the planet right now, does a lot of neuroscience research. And Glenn is the premier scalar energy scientist in the United States, who's done a lot of work with heart math and does research on DNA and research on water. And so we're going to see if we can come up with something novel by affecting greater awakening with bringing these two minds together. So I hope you can tune in for that. Thanks again, Olivia.
And, my pleasure. Thank you.
We'll all be on your show. So have a great night, everyone.
Bye.